You're listening to the Narrow Path Epistles podcast, where we talk everything faith, tech, and fellowship. In this episode, the CEO and founder of Naro, Dustin Poisson, and host of the podcast, discuss a little bit about God's redemptive power when it comes to man-made creation.
So I wanted to talk today about technology as it exists in today's world, because from what we've observed in the past 35 years, technology has started from the basement of young 20-year-olds for the most part, as far as like where even social technology has gone, where Amazon is, where Facebook is. Like it all stemmed from one person. And the question is, has this actually been aligned with God's purpose for technology? And the thing is, God does have a purpose because it has been created, and anything that has been created belongs to God. It's just whether or not we have actually aligned with the purpose that he has in a way that glorifies and honors him. And to think through this, I want to actually go back to the first thing man ever created, which was fig leaves. This was in Genesis 3:7 when Adam and Eve committed the first sin and realized that they were naked. And God's like, how do you know that you're naked? And in doing so, they sewed together fig leaves to cover themselves. And we see the initial thing that man has created is actually rooted in sin. It's from kind of leaning our own understanding of what nakedness was at that time. But God, he comes back and a little bit further in Genesis 3, at Genesis 3:21, he redeems that initial technology with animal clothing. And it's so funny because he doesn't reinvent the wheel. He actually uses what we've already created for its purpose to create something that's actually better. And that's what I feel as though we're kind of at in this point of time, where we've spent the last 30 years or so developing technology, especially like in the social space, media, things of that nature, where we've leaned on our own understanding of what it should be. And a lot of it has been geared around something that is going to be used repeatedly, something that's going to make a lot of money, and not really have any moralistic boundaries as to how we're going to do this. And we've seen this through the abuse of privacy, the features and functions that push people toward sin, such as lust, validation. We see algorithms creating echo chambers for people and their beliefs to only result in this extremism. So the platform in itself has now become biased based off of our understanding of what things should be, instead of rooting them in biblical principles. I think what we have to realize is God's purpose for technology is greater than our own purpose. And that's why, we saw it with the animal skin. And we're in a time where, as Christian tech leaders and as Christian developers and people in this technical field, we have to start stepping into and questioning what is God's purpose for technology now, especially as it starts to progress into AI, blockchain, Web3, all of these areas that is only going to rapidly create even more chaos from letting, technology continue down the path of what it understands. Because that's basically what AI stems from, is from an understanding from what it's fed. And we're at a point where we need to start reflecting as Christian founders on if the technology that we've actually created is something that needs to continue to progress in the same direction, or if it's something that we actually need to look at and be like, how can we align this with God's purpose? And I think where this starts is going back to who our God is and recognizing that he deserves all the glory and honor that stems from what's been created. It goes back to this idea of wonder, even as builders, as creators of things of this world, to recognize that that creation comes from him. Like, we were made in the image of God. The gift of creation, the gift of building, the gift of being able to take something that he has created and form it into something new ultimately comes from him. And in Revelation 4:11, we see, "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they were created and have their being." So it all stems back to, like, how do we start to grasp this worship again? And how do we start to actually honor God for what he has created, and to just trust that his purpose is better than our own purpose for technology? Because ultimately, technology facilitates interaction between God's creation, us being one of those creations, but it's how we interact with each other, the world, pretty much anything in this day and age. You're interacting with technology, and it has such implications of impact within our lives. And we need to start looking at its implications within our lives from a Christian perspective to determine whether or not it's actually leading us toward Jesus Christ. And it may just be setting boundaries with what's currently created from the worldly perspective. Or it may, as tech leaders, be creating new technologies that create space with the proper boundaries that aren't going to tempt its users, aren't going to abuse users' information to just feed them and keep them on the app, or utilize gamification to just make as much money as possible and let our users like live in this game world and take them away from living the life that exists around us, from connecting with the people around us, from becoming rooted in communities, to giving back, to being generous, to all of these Christian ideals and biblical principles that Jesus Christ has asked us to do while we live in this world. Because this has implications directly correlated to our lives, because the technology is so prevalent, whether it's communicating between one another, whether it's exchanging of goods, creating goods, developing, operating, sustaining. Life is facilitated through technology. So when our technology isn't rooted in glorifying and honoring God, it makes it very difficult to lead a life where we are glorifying and honoring God, because of the prevalence of technology in our lives. It really defines the way that we live. And we were called to live for Jesus Christ. So this is the focal point of this podcast, because I really want it to be a call to action. It's one of the main reasons why I included epistles in the title. Is I want it to be a discussion that's directed toward leaders, that's directed toward developers, pastors, theologians, to come in and discuss how do we actually implement biblical principles within applications, within the things that we build, within the things that we create, that are going to have a huge societal impact to people's lives, that are going to become a part of their everyday, and actually have something that's rooted in good be a part of someone's everyday, as opposed to technology that is not rooted in good be a part of people's everyday. And it all stems down to the way that we're building, the features and the functionalities, our own walk with the Lord to ensure that we fully know God's voice, that we fully go to God first whenever making these decisions that are millions of people are going to use, to actually recognize that leadership is something to be taken seriously, and to have that sort of power and impact on so many people's lives. It can't be abused. We have to align ourselves with the one true person who is capable of this power and impact, and that's God. It can only happen through us, but it isn't us. So we have to always go back to God and to understand the teachings of Jesus Christ in order to implement what is actually good in the steps that we're making, to ensure that we're not just worshiping money, that we're not just trying to acquire accolades or get numbers or, please our investors. Like, all those are important, right? Like, money is vital for running a business, but we can't prioritize that over our users and over the goodness of God. And when it comes to that, we also just have to have faith that in pursuing Christ and in pursuing God and creating technology that is going to be good for users, that it will bring provision, that it will bring abundance, that we don't have to lean on our own understanding to acquire that abundance. We just need to lean on Christ to trust that in doing good, he's actually going to provide. And I think once we actually start heading in that direction, then there's going to be a lot of healing through technology, because at this present time, I feel as though technology, there's not a lot of trust. There's not a lot of trust with companies. There's not a lot of trust with regards to, secure data or privacy. There's not a lot of trust with AI. Like, there's not a lot of trust with blockchain. And instead of actually breaking it down and being like, hey, like, we're actually going to focus on the accountability of us as creatives and focus on creating something that's stemmed in biblical principles that isn't going to take advantage of our users, we're just continuing forward at full speed. The beautiful thing about today, though, is it's never been a greater time in the existence of the world to actually spread the good news, to actually reach all nations. And we have this opportunity to actually use what exists to fulfill what we were called to do in spreading the good news about Jesus Christ. So God has created everything that we need in order to do so. It's just whether or not we're aligning with utilizing that technology as a means of spreading the good news. And then once the good news is spread, supporting our fellow Christians to grow in understanding the gospel, to disciple them, to live life with one another. And ultimately, through spreading the good news, it will slowly start to seep into society. Leaders in other industries and other areas to lead with biblical principles, to start to enter into spaces that maybe we can't enter into, and through shared experience lead to change and lead to healing in this world, and ultimately allow us to bring more people to Christ. And technology, to me, is really the only thing that can do that. The internet, communication at scale only happens with this technology. Not one single organization can do this. And we as the church have this opportunity to utilize technology to actually bring the church, the full church, united together to ultimately become the thing that leads to bringing people to Christ, to the way, to spread the gospel and also live life and disciple one another, which we were called to do. So that's why I want to call together current Christian tech leaders, developers, business owners, theologians, pastors, whoever it is that is aligned with utilizing technology as a means of discipling believers, to come on this podcast, to sit down and talk with me and ideate and come up with ways that we can continue to develop technology while acknowledging the current progress of where technology is at as far as like AI, blockchain, considering how we can look at today's current social technology or other technology and redeem it in those areas to create something that doesn't exist for specifically discipleship or growing in faith, to remove some of the temptations from today's current social technology and have a space where we can actually focus on what's important, and that's pursuing a relationship with Jesus Christ. When you are pursuing a relationship with Jesus Christ, everything else in your life starts to improve. Your relationships, not even relationships with people, but like relationships with your career, the way that you perceive and look at the things that you used to idolize now become something that is beautiful and not so dependent for your like mental health. And it just creates this space to be generous and be a part of building the community. And I believe as we come together and be the church in this space, in the marketplace, we'll start to see change that goes beyond just the church as it's identified by the world. We can start to actually become a people, which is what the church actually is a people who follow Christ, and utilizing technology, unite and start to create change in the world that is good, that is rooted in God.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. We wanted to leave you with a couple of reflection points to just pray on and think about. How can you utilize technology to grow closer to God? In what ways can technology create opportunities for others to encounter God? How can Christian developers and leaders uphold biblical values when defining features and functionality? And what boundaries have you created with technology to ensure that your relationship with God takes priority? If you like this episode, make sure you give us a like and follow us to keep up with future episodes. If you have any questions, leave comments on the podcast or even recommend any Christian tech leaders that you feel like we should host. We're excited to keep growing with you, and we'll see you next time. God bless.